Hi, I'm Diana Yoakley. I'm a peaceful parenting coach and mom of three, and I'm delighted to give you the latest science backed research on child development, parenting, and to support you in showing up as the parent that you want to be. Welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I am your host, Diana Yoakley, and I'm so excited to have here with me Say Eshelman. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Well, so close. C. Eshelman.
C. Eshelman. Okay, yes. Welcome. I'm so delighted to have you. I know I was on your podcast a few weeks back, and it was really great to talk about children and parents with big feelings and moments that are hard. And I'm really hoping and excited that we can dive into this topic a little bit further, but reversing our seats today. So
Yeah.
I really want to pick your brain, and we're going to get into some really, I think, juicy things that will really be helpful for parents experiencing some big feelings, big behaviors in their home. So before we get into the topic, I want to tell you guys a little bit about C. So C is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and founded the Attach Place Center for Strengthening Relationships in Sacramento, California, where she has used her 37 years of experience to support hundreds of adoptive families move from chaos to calm using her Love Plus parenting model, a brain-based, compassion-forward parenting approach. C is the author of 2 books for adoptive parents, Drowning with My Hair on Fire, Insanity Relief for Adoptive Parents, and 20 Things Children from Difficult Beginnings Wish Friends and Family Knew. I love those titles. Very relatable, right? She also writes the weekly Love Matters blog and hosts the weekly Unmuted Love podcast. And you can learn more about her work at lovemattersparenting.com. And we're going to have that linked certainly here below the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today. Thank you for taking the time and helping my parenting audience better understand what's going on when times are difficult in homes.
Thank you, Diana. My pleasure for being here. I would love to talk about this stuff. This is what I talk about all
Yeah.
day long, every day, and it's my passion. So here we go.
Yeah. No, I love it. And you're an expert. You have a lot of experience, and I know personal experience plus professional experience with your own children. And so I'd love for you to kind of maybe elaborate a little bit more about your passion for doing this work today and supporting parents. And then we'll get into meltdowns, defiance, strong-willed kids, big feelings, challenging behavior.
Yeah, no problem. So let's see. I guess I'll rewind all the way back to 27 years ago because my kids are all grown up now. But when I first brought them home from the
Mm-hmm.
foster care system, I had 2 of them. I brought them home
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. They were 2 and 3.5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I was already a therapist for 15 years. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, I've got this, I'll be great. A single parent, I'll be great. Um, and they weren't in my house. Okay, I always say 5 minutes, but it was a little longer than that.
Yeah.
5 hours maybe. And I
Yeah.
realized, oh, there's something different about these kids, right? There's something different. They don't respond to me. Um,
Mm.
they don't seem to acknowledge the hierarchy of being a parent to a child. They behaved as though they were my equals, but they were only 2 and 3 years old. And so I really didn't know what to do with that. And every time I tried to be a parent, it just blew them up. So talk about big emotions, talk about big feelings. Oh my. And all 3 of us were having them, right? I'm having the same big feelings at their big feelings in that moment because I didn't get what was happening. I mean, you would think I would know since I was
Yeah.
a therapist, but back then, 27 years ago, trauma informed wasn't really a thing.
Yeah.
Adopting
Mhm.
competent wasn't a thing. You didn't get any real education when you brought your kids home about, what might be going on there. So I had to learn about trauma, attachment rupture, and early childhood trauma from my kids. So I get
Mhm.
my passion for what I do from having really screwed it up big time in the beginning, just trying to figure it out on my kids. And it wasn't until early adolescence, probably, where I started to really understand therapeutic parenting and what these big feelings were really about. Trauma became much more part of the vernacular. And I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, okay, this is what's been going on. I did travel all over the world trying to go to trainings, to figure it out. But it's all very clinical back then. And it was like, okay, that's kind of hard to cipher through to get to, okay, but how do you parent? Okay, I get the problem, but I don't get the
Hmm.
solution.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you're putting that in perspective. I think, nowadays there's so many more resources on trauma informed, you know, complex PTSD, but then also like acute trauma, and just like the bestseller, The Body Keeps the Score, I think was just such a game changer for therapists, but also just the general parents and community wide awareness of, to really get to the root of healing, we have to go into the body.
Mhm.
And somatics is such an important piece even today, I think, like really kind of outshining some other strategies for trauma. So I love that you're talking about, the struggles with adopting children and the traumas that they went through probably before they were adopted, and now the transition point, and now like you said, like this parenting alignment, what roles are we in, our children feeling like we are protective of them through connection, or are they pushing away connection because in the past it was dangerous. So what I
Yeah.
want to go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to add to that so what is true is that yes, my kids came with those two pieces of trauma, but then my parenting what
Mm-hmm.
further traumatized them because my parenting was what my mother did. Now, if I had thought a little bit about it, I'd be like, well, wait a second, my mom wasn't very nice to me. Maybe I shouldn't do this to my kids, but that's all I knew really. And so
Mm-hmm.
I just went about some traditional parenting with my kids, and it got the I kept ratcheting up the traditional parenting, more punishment, harsher punishment, more fierce facial expressions and louder voice and all of that. And so my kids got a pretty big dose of sort of situational daily trauma from me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
that added to the problem. And I know I'm talking about adopted kids right now, but I know a lot of your listeners are not adoptive parents particularly, but it doesn't really matter because if you are a traditional parent and you have a strong-willed child or you're just having trouble making that connection with your child for whatever reason, then you probably are going to be pulling out a lot of traditional parenting practices that will actually, if you keep ratcheting them up, they will harm your kids emotionally, right? Your kids will just
Yeah.
to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, well, I would love for you to kind of, maybe you can define trauma for us in kind of like a very like parent digestible sense, and then link like, how does traditional parenting and complex PTSD and trauma, how are those all like interlinked? What's going on in the body and the brain?
Right, right. Well, so we often refer to it as big T and small t trauma. So big T would be the things that came before me with my kids. The attachment rupture, which is a huge trauma to the brain body complex of a developing child, infant. And then the abuse trauma on top of that, also very traumatizing to the entire system. Those would be
Mhm.
big T traumas. But then the ones that came with me were more small T traumas, sort of like, where I would be so frustrated, I would just yell at them. And then if you do that enough, you're creating small T trauma, where your child becomes afraid of you. And the reason why you start yelling at your children is that your own regulation system gets dysregulated in the presence of dysregulated others. And my children were dysregulated, which means just emotionally outside the window of tolerance of balance, right? And so then I started being outside the window of tolerance. And it doesn't really matter if it's big T or small t at a certain point because the nervous system is the nervous system and it gets dysregulated by experience. And sometimes it's wired, your nervous system is actually wired by big T trauma. And so
Mhm.
there are lots of things going on where these converge, like parents often come with their own big T trauma and small t trauma to parenting. Then if you bring children in like mine who had big T trauma, and then you apply some small t trauma on top of that, and then I bring my big T trauma from childhood to it, And now there are three of us in my home, literally trauma engagement all the time. So we are living in a state of toxic stress. And
Mm-hmm.
toxic stress is that state where you really don't regulate. You stay pretty much outside the window of tolerance all the time. So you're very on
Mm-hmm.
edge, very prickly, it doesn't take very much, right, to set that off in anybody, in any one of the people in the family. Now, I know you know this, but a parent is supposed to be by biology, right? By biology, we're supposed to be the co-regulator of our children. Meaning, when our kids get upset, we're supposed to go to our kids and soothe them, right? And comfort them. Well, that's very hard to do if your kids are upset and you're upset too. You can't be the co-regulator that biology intended you to be for them because you're too dysregulated. And so you don't act as a soother to their nervous systems. So
Mm-hmm.
so they don't get a chance to become regulated people. And over time, then that dysregulation in the system creates complex trauma in the parent, often, right? Sort of a vicarious traumatization if you didn't have your own trauma. But also, it creates the situation where the children are not maturing at the rate that they would ordinarily because the dysregulation is flooding their prefrontal cortex, which is where their executive function is. So they end up becoming delayed in their development because of this. So this toxic stress is a big deal. And that's why, as
Mm-hmm.
parents, we really need to slow down a little bit and look at ourselves first, right? So a lot of times we're looking at our kids. I was looking at my kid like, what's wrong with you? And you need to change. I
Yeah,
wasn't looking
yeah,
at what's wrong with me and I need to change, or, how can I change? I was really not looking for that. I was looking for how can I control these little, monkeys in my house. Um,
yeah.
I just asked the wrong questions back then. Now I ask the right questions and I help people ask the right questions when they come
Mm-hmm.
to me, as I know you do too.
Yeah. Oh, that was such a so many like amazing insights in what you were saying. I'd love to pull out a couple of things just to highlight that what you were saying about trauma. Trauma essentially is an overwhelmed nervous system.
Yeah.
And if it's an emotional trauma, the child is having an emotional experience and their system is overwhelmed. Now, generally, there's a difference between like just being overwhelmed and then it integrating. So you can have a bad moment and everybody blows up, but then you are able to
Mhm.
reconnect and repair. So duration and intensity obviously are important. And you come back with the child and they're able to integrate, process their emotions about it, calm back down in your presence. And that is not trauma. That is an integration of stress. It's completing the stress cycle, right? That's like just your daily upset, whatever. Trauma would be one indicator would be repeated experiences that keep happening and the stress cycle stays open. Like you're not, the child gets upset, you get upset, everybody's dysregulated. And then maybe there's like a shame spiral for the parent and the parent doesn't come back and repair and the child feels left alone in their suffering. So trauma, I've always often heard like Dr. Gabor Mate say, trauma isn't what happens to you, it's who was there to support you when it
Mhm.
happens. So imagining a child that's feeling upset, dysregulated, big feelings, big behaviors, and the parent isn't available because they're also feeling traumatized by the spiral. And
Mhm.
now both people feel alone. And then they kind of close out that segment and move on with the next thing, but it's not finished. I don't know if you
Yes,
can speak to that. Yeah.
exactly. Repair is really important to the process. And if you didn't get good repair in childhood from your own parent,
Mm-hmm.
as a child, then you become a parent who doesn't really even recognize that as something that's necessary, right, in order to integrate. And so that's really, I think, part of it is that we don't all understand. I certainly didn't understand how this all works and how,
Right.
like you can get upset at your child, but the goal is to um, regulate yourself so that you can go to your child and repair so that they can regulate, and
Hmm.
that you can have this ruptured repair, emotional rupture repaired, and then you can go forward. And that's how it's actually intended. That's
Yeah.
actually how we build resilience in children, right?
Hmm.
Children become resilient when you do that process over and over and over. A ch-
And the parent doesn't have to be perfect, right?
oh, not at all.
That's what allows for the imperfect parenting because nobody's perfect, right? Like,
No,
right.
no. I mean, I would say if you've got 60% of the time, you're doing great, you know? 60% of the time you, not that you're regulated 60% of the time, just that you are managed to repair 60% of the time after being
Yeah.
regulated, you know?
Yeah.
I made
Yeah.
that statistic up. I don't think that's the actual statistic, but that's what it feels like in my group anyway. And I feel like you're
Hmm.
doing pretty well because that's, that's more than the majority. It's more of the time where you repair rather than just stay with a left open system that doesn't get repaired.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so, so there's a difference between being imperfectly like, your intention is to come back and reconnect and to calm yourself down and come back to your child. The struggle and the dangers are when the child feels like nobody's coming emotionally and nobody actually comes emotionally. So repair can look different in different, families and different circumstances. Obviously there's like a best practice, but the whole idea is that does the child feel like you're back to your best, like your parent self, like the warm, calm, loving parent? Because we all have these like different parts of us, right? Like the shame spiral part, or like the angry part, or the whatever it is. But coming back to them, it's that reconnection where they feel like, oh, we're back together on the bridge. I'm not
Yes.
alone. That they don't feel alone in this, right? Emotionally, that is the key. Now, this whole process seems like pretty simple, but it's so hard because some kids actually do. Let's assume the parent is relatively calm, but the child has some really, maybe they have like autism, maybe they do have trauma, acute trauma, and the child has some big behaviors and big emotions that would overwhelm any person,
Mhm.
even a calm person. Um, what would be the best case scenario in intervening? Let's say if you're a relatively calm parent, but your child has some big reactivities, is highly sensitive, strong willed. And then we can talk about when the parent also brings their own stuff into the equation.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there are a number of things that we could talk about, but I'll just say sort of generally, I mean, there's fit, right? Sometimes the parent-child um, personalities just aren't great fits, right? Like this child
Mm-hmm.
grates on my nerves and it's hard for me to attend well because of the way the sound of his screaming, or because of the look on his face, or because I'm just annoyed by this and I don't know why. And I'm not this way with my other children and I just don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably a fit problem. And so then the question, I mean, and so that's one piece. I'll just back up from
Mm-hmm.
there. That it's really important, I think, for us to see through the lens of um, the the brain of the child, what's happening in the brain of the child, what's happening in the nervous system of the child. And if you have a child with autism, then you know that there's neurodivergence there. And that means that we have to see through a lens of brain first so that we can meet them where they're at. That would be true of any child. Autism is sort of the most extreme in there. But I mean, also a child with ADHD, seeing them through the brain and the nervous system is like, if you don't see an ADHD or an autistic child in the through that lens, I mean, you are going to be outside your mind, just trying to figure out, well, how do I manage myself and them, right? Because it's just like constant. But when you start seeing through the brain lens, then it's so much easier to parent because all you're doing is supporting their nervous system where they're at. And that means I always think this means first regulating yourself, because when a child just screams, every parent's nervous system shoots up, right? Because a scream
Mm-hmm.
is a danger signal. So
Yeah.
of course you're going to get a little dysregulated. And the goal would be to look and see, is it danger? Is it an emergency? Or is it just screaming? Like screaming because he doesn't want to put his shoes on. In which case then you can calm yourself because you know it's not an emergency. You can go, oh, wait, this isn't an emergency. All right. Let me regulate myself, maybe a couple of breaths, a drink of water, just reminding yourself, oh, not an emergency might be enough. And then you look at, well, what's happening for him? For some reason, putting on his shoes is causing a dysregulated state in this child. Now, maybe as a parent, you're like, I don't get that. They know they have to put on shoes. So why are they getting so
Mhm.
dysregulated? But it's either, not the right shoes. The shoes don't feel good, not the right time. They weren't ready for it. They weren't expecting it. They don't want to stop doing whatever they're doing, right? There might be a number of things happening. And so slowing down and just going, I wonder what's happening for this child at this time, my child at this time. Not all children about putting on their shoes, but my child. My child doesn't actually like going to school. So putting on shoes is the first signal that they're about to leave the house and go to school. And that's anxiety provoking. And so you might get a scream. In which case, then, as a parent, after I regulate myself, would be to meet my child there. It's like, oh, you don't want to put on your shoes this morning. I get it. What's happening? And then just lean into your child with empathy and respect for their humanness and listen to what you hear. Now, you might think, oh, he just doesn't want to go to school. But it turns out maybe it's that the shoes just got a little small for them, right? It could be any number of things. But if we don't lean in and really
Mhm.
listen, all we hear is a scream and the usual, just put your shoes on because we're going to school. You're not getting out of school just because you don't want to put your shoes on. That that's not actually leaning in and caring about the reason your child is dysregulated right this moment. I don't know
Mhm.
if I answered your question, but I answered a lot of questions.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love this. Like the scripting through, and I know some parents listening would probably say, like, there's no way I can stay calm because of these repeated, they have this like pattern now. The
Yeah.
child does this, they react because they've been so like they're so triggered by this now because it's so overwhelming for the parent's nervous system that it's really hard for them to stay calm. So that's one of the challenges, I think. And another one would be if the parent is able to stay calm and be empathic, some kids with the pattern they have might even scream at the parent, go away, you know, or worse, right? Like, and they're basically not going to accept that empathy. They're going to escalate. So I wonder if you can kind of address those
Yeah.
two kind of probably common scenarios.
Yeah, they're very common. So again, it's the same thing. If you lean in and your child says, leave me alone, get away from me, okay, then, step back. Leaning in, not a good idea. If you know your child, you probably already know this is going to happen. So those predictable loops are called negative feedback loops. And so we can pretty much predict those are going to happen. So the first step would be to know your child, right? Understand how these loops happen. And then what is your part and what is their part? And you can't change,
Mm-hmm.
newsflash, you can't change your child. You can change yourself, which will impact your child in a positive way or a negative way, depending on how you change yourself, right? So if leaning in doesn't work, or if let's say you think it does and it usually does, but today it doesn't, then pull back a little, just a little. Pull back, slow down, get smaller, maybe sit on the ground, and just say, I'm here. I'm here when you're ready, right? Just be present. No, get away from me, maybe is the retort. Okay, sweetheart, I'm going to move back even a little more for you, but I just don't want to leave you alone because I love you. I'm here. And when you're ready, we can talk about what's going on, or we'll put your shoes on, or maybe we'll get a snack, right? Whatever it is that you know about your child. There's no cookie cutter. There's no cookie cutter. Children are not all the same. And that's why you have to get to know your child, see through the lens of their brain, and have empathy for what's really going on in that moment. Because your same child will change also over time and then surprise you with new behavior, right? So now let's back up to, well, what do you do if you're so dysregulated and you're in this negative feedback loop? Well, it's it's not an easy answer. It's about really coming to understand your own nervous system and how do you take care of your own nervous system on a regular enough basis so that any one thing you do actually calms you. So for
Mm-hmm.
example, um, I could tell myself to breathe all day long and I could do it all the right ways and it doesn't regulate me. It doesn't regulate me. Breathing is not my regulation strategy. Now, I learned that if I pinch my ears, that totally regulates me. And it didn't in the beginning, but I did it enough where now all I have to
Yeah.
do is just squeeze my ears just a little bit and my whole nervous system calms straight down. So I've learned that about myself and through regular intervals of vagus nerve, nervous system regulation strategies for toning so that I'm real now my nervous system is pretty toned. So when I get dysregulated, it doesn't take very much to calm myself down, which is amazing because when I had younger children, I couldn't imagine that. But now it's so easy. But I learned
Hmm.
strategies. And so the first step is to change your own part of the negative feedback loop, right?
So imagining like this child's melting down in the closet, doesn't want to come out, you're running late for school,
Mhm.
trying to go in there and get them to cooperate is going to be a losing strategy when you yourself are dysregulated. So it's technically like cut off that, like pretend like that child's not even there. You have to calm your body down before you do anything else at this point, right?
Absolutely. You know, the mantra is stop, drop your
Yeah.
agenda, and breathe, right? So,
Yeah.
and whatever mantra you need. So, breathe wasn't a good one for me. Stop. This is how I did it. Stop. And I clapped my hand over my mouth because my mouth wants to run when I'm dysregulated. So, I had to learn to not speak by putting my hand over my lips. And that made it possible for me to not speak enough to realize to kind of let my own brain kick in and go, oh, yeah, okay, not talking. That's good. Now take a step back. What does it work for me? Breathing, no, but pinch my ears, yes. And then tell myself, this is my mantra: stop, drop your agenda, step back, pinch your ears, and remind yourself you love him. That was my mantra. Remind yourself I love him. And I put that actually on a sticky on every door before they could read. I put it on every door. Stop.
Yeah. Oh, I love stickies. I just replenish my stack because it's such a go-to strategy. Like it's so old school, but it's like it works.
It
Because
totally
when
works.
you're done with it, yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
you can't grab your phone and go, what's the mantra? What's the mantra?
Right.
Girl, it's got to be right in your face. And it does
Hmm.
help. It really helps. So you go old school, everybody,
Yeah.
because it really, really does work. So that's how, so it's a process you can hear. So there's no one solution for any parent either. You have to find the solution that works for you. There's a general structure to it, and you can borrow that one if that one works. Awesome. But if it doesn't, make your own, make one that does work for
Hmm.
you. And then when you're regulated, go back. And that will have already interrupted the negative feedback loop. You yourself just changing that one little piece, which isn't little, mind you, it's quite big, but
Yeah.
changing that one piece will change the interaction you have with your child.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
do I do think it's important to say when I say drop my agenda, I mean drop my agenda, which is I'm late. They're already late for school. I'm going to be late for work. There's a whole bunch to an agenda, right? It's not just put the shoes on. That's an agenda. Get your shoes on. That's one agenda. But then there's in your head, there's I gotta, get some coffee before I go, and I've got to, I'm already late, and I've got to go. We've got to go. Let's go, right? That's an agenda that is just driving you from behind in a way that's not helpful.
Hmm. Yeah, and I feel like the reason this feeds into our own dysregulation is because that agenda is almost like a script that says you should. Because let's say what's going to happen if you're late for school. You're going to feel like a bad parent because they're going to keep saying, why is your kid showing up late for class? What's going on? You should parent better, right? You should. And then that invokes this feeling of shame. Or let's say you're late for work. You should be here on time. What is wrong with you and your family dynamic that you're constantly late, right? So there's this, I think, kind of the back end of this urgency is
Mhm.
avoidance of shame with other adults, with society, with our own self-perception and identity. But what we're sacrificing then, if we go with that, we're sacrificing the relationship we have with our child, which ultimately impacts their literal brain development. So it's kind of it's like a bad choice because like is your child going to pay the price for this, or are you going to feel shame about it? So I'm wondering if you have any mantras or reframes for that self-talk that ultimately leads to the shame feeling, I think in many cases, or self-criticism in some form. How can we tackle that more consciously? Because it's like like a few steps down, it leads to that. But can we kind of consciously front load that with a reframe so that we can slow down a little bit, and that emergency, like sense of emergency, it's an emergency, can help our nervous system slow down a little bit. I don't know if you find anything that kind of works for that.
Yeah, maybe some of your listeners are familiar with Mel Robbins. Mel Robbins
Yeah, I love her.
is of the let them, let them
Yes.
um,
Theory. Yeah.
mantra.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's the same for us parents. If another child's parent is going to judge you, let them. If the teacher's going to judge you for protecting the brain of your child, let them. If your extended family is going to tell you that you are doing it all wrong, let them. You can't control all these people, and you shouldn't, right? You shouldn't need to. And it's too bad because they're actually wrong in this case, right? So when people are wrong, let them be. You don't have to change them. You don't have to convince them. You don't have to teach them. No, none of that. You're just like, this is what I'm going to do. And so I really encourage parents to find their true north, which is what what guides you. For
Hmm.
me, I am guided by what I know is to be true. So like when I learned about neuroscience, I was like, oh, okay, this is irrefutable. This is why. And this is
Yeah.
why it's a brain thing. And if I
Hmm.
if I keep doing what I should do according to all these people, I'll be harming the brain of my child over time. And I'm not going to do that. I know my true north, and it is to be the best protection for my child, which is to know better, right? To know better than all these other voices. So I think there's a piece like that. Let them judge you, let them say things, let them, give you the hairy eyeball, whatever they're going to do, let them.
Hmm.
That's easier said than done, but also work on your own shame, right? So shame is about who you are. It's not about something you've done. And you're just parenting when you're parenting right, when you're parenting well for your child's brain. So you're not actually wrong. It's not who you are, right? Who you are is actually right. And so standing in your truth about what's right, and letting go of the shame because the shame doesn't belong to you, is really important. And so I think working on your own shame, where did you get that? Where does it come from? How,
Yeah.
how can you re-narrate that shame? You probably got it in childhood. Most of us did. And then we're applying it in adulthood. But we probably
Yeah.
got some messages that we should do this, we should do that, and that if we don't, we're shameful. But that's actually not the truth either. There's a lot of shame and cultural shame, right? That doesn't is not really truth. It's just epigenetics. We end up with a lot of epigenetic shame that
Hmm.
doesn't belong to us.
Yeah, yeah, I love that you're addressing this because there's kind of this like real time social shame with like the people you're going to encounter, but also it can be so internalized that it becomes our own voice, and
Mhm.
it's like it's coming from inside of you. And I love like these two questions when you find yourself in that spot where it's in an internal voice and you're like conflicted. What do I do? Do I respond to this voice or tend to my child? I think one question is to ask like, who is talking right now?
Sure.
Whose voice is this? Because this voice is actually telling me to do something that's going to hurt my child. But so it must not be mine. Whose is this? Where did I hear this? Whoever.
Mhm.
And then maybe like, who said this to me?
Always,
Yeah.
always. Yeah. Always ask those questions when you're really
Yeah.
doing the work.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
neurosculpt it, right? Then write a new narrative. It's never too
Mm.
late to write a new narrative about these things. And then read it. Write the new narrative, read it to yourself, because you're the one who needs to hear this new story enough to the point where it's the story you tell yourself when in those moments when somebody is looking down their nose at you. That's why I wrote my second book, which is
Yeah.
20 things children from difficult beginnings wish friends and family knew. It's really a book from the child's point of view about their behavior.
Yeah.
And they
Hmm.
wish that friends and family would know this so that they wouldn't judge their parents.
The parents
They wouldn't judge their parents, wouldn't judge them, right? Either
wouldn't
way.
judge them. Yeah. Yeah, because so much is people not understanding, right? And
Yeah.
of course, how can they? They didn't live that life. They're not studying that, right? So there's also some like compassion for people that are hurtful, but at the same time,
They don't know.
how can we become advocates of ourselves
Right.
and educate them in the moment?
Yeah, because when we know better, we do better, right? And when they know
Hmm.
better, they do better, usually, not always, because it's very hard to change old habits, old beliefs about traditional parenting in
Hmm.
particular. But that's okay.
Yeah,
Times are changing. They'll always be changing. And once you know what you actually can't unsee it, which is awesome.
right. Yes, I love that. And I've also found self compassion to be a huge antidote to shame and also just really supportive of nervous system regulation. The experts on self compassion even call it reparenting ourselves,
Yeah.
kind of integrating that compassionate voice in our nervous system that maybe wasn't there. And I'd love for you, because you're mentioning about like repeating it and practicing it. What's been your experience? How many repetitions? How many times? How many weeks, months? Because parents will try this like once and they're like, well, that doesn't work for me. I'm not
Mhm.
going to do it anymore. How many
Yeah.
times do they have to like try a new mantra, or putting their like pinching their ears or putting their hand over their mouth before they start to see some small wins or
Yeah.
total shift? I don't know.
Yeah. So it takes 400 repetitions of one thing to make it a new neural pathway. 400 repetitions just for one thing to make it one
Wow.
new neural pathway. So think of all the things you say and how many times you have to
Hmm.
say it in order to make it a new neural pathway. So that's one version of looking at it. Another is, you have to do something for 21 days to make it a habit. And most of us stop whatever we're doing at 2 weeks. Diets, exercise
Hmm.
programs, I'm going to walk every day. You manage that 2 weeks and then you stop. And that's why it never becomes a habit. So it's so
Hmm.
important to realize that, and it's true for our kids too. We need to say those things to our kids repetitiously, not because they're not listening, but because their brain can't get it for all time the first time. I don't know where we got this. I would just want to say it one time and you're going to do it. I'm like, okay, like what? You know, that doesn't even work for me. If
Right, right.
my partner tells me something and I'm like, yeah, okay, okay. And then I don't remember to do it the next time.
Yeah, yeah. And I love the classic that parents say, like, how many times do I have to repeat myself?
I
And
know,
technically
400.
speaking, it's like about 400 before I really am smooth at it. But it's such an expectation. Like, I've said it once, I've said it a million times. Has it really been a million? Maybe we're not at 400 yet. That's why we're still here.
Yeah, and it has to be said fairly exactly too. I mean, we're not,
Right.
it's not like you can say it, hey, put your shoes on. Oh, maybe sometime you'd like to put your shoes on. Or I'm thinking the first time I say put your shoes on, put your shoes on, that's three different ways you said put your shoes on. That's not,
Hmm.
that doesn't go into the 400. One of those goes into each of the 400.
Yeah, because we're talking about the 400 becoming an automatic reaction where it's literally an unconscious habit. It's something you do unconsciously, right? Which is where we want to be. We currently are doing things unconsciously that are not skillful or helpful some of the time,
Yeah.
or much of the time. And so to try to make it something that you don't have to think about doing, you have to think about it 400 times, and then you probably won't have to think about it that much. And then eventually you don't have to think about it at all. It's just going to be what you do.
Yeah. This pinching of the ears thing, it's the first thing I do, and I only do it once. And I used to have to do it repeatedly over and over and over
Yeah.
in order to get just some relaxation in my brainstem. Now, just once. Like
Yeah.
right now, I can just feel my brainstem relaxing all the way down.
Settling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I did it, actually, how I did it was I'm a therapist, right? So every hour in between clients, I would do this, right?
I
Because I
love
wanted
it.
to let
Yeah.
go. And
Yeah.
that
And it
was
served a
supposed to fit.
purpose at work too.
Totally, totally. So at
Yeah.
home and at work, everywhere, everywhere. When you're having a
Yeah.
bad day, somebody
Right.
pushes you off the road, just a little pinch of your ears and like, oh, okay, it's all right. It's not an emergency. I'm all right, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I love it. I love that you give that specific example. I know some people are going to be out there trying it out, me included, to see if that's something that works for them. And yeah, and sticking with the repetitions. Yeah, that's a great, great perspective of kind of what's going on with the parent. I'd love to switch back to the child struggling now, and maybe we can zoom in a little bit more on their nervous system. Why do they behave like? Why are they reacting the way they do? And I guess generally, probably parents already, like my audience already understands why consequences and like rewards, like timeouts, don't really work. But we'll also love for you to highlight what happens over time if the parent doesn't implement these calming strategies for themselves and intervene with the child calmly. What happens to the child's nervous system over time and
Yeah.
their reactivity?
Yeah, it stays elevated and the window of tolerance can be either very broad, which means you can have a lot of things happen in your life and you don't lose your mind either direction. Like you don't collapse into a puddle and you
Yeah,
don't, throw a fit. And you can get a broad bandwidth or you can get a narrow one. And so if you don't respond in a regulated way often enough to your child over time, they get a more and more, first of all, they may have started with a narrow one just because of their
yeah.
biology. Um, but then it gets more and more narrow. So now your child is living with a very narrow bandwidth for anything, for change, for not getting what they want, for anxiety, for it, just you name it, right? Now
Frustration tolerance is very low, right?
so low. And so now,
Mm-hmm.
now you have a child that just can't tolerate much of anything, including being parented,
Mm.
including just the sound of a parent's voice. There's a parent's parenting voice, and then there's just a voice, right? And most of us speak in a parenting voice to our children, and then they get
Yeah.
to the place where they just can't tolerate the sound of our voice in that tone. So now you have a child that's reactive to you. Your very voice that you have for them becomes a trigger for them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's intense when you get that kid, right? And if you don't know about it, well, if you knew about it, you probably would have intervened sooner. But if you don't know about it, you can't do something new if you don't know about it. But if you don't know about it, now you're just in a constant struggle with your child, power struggle all the time.
Yes, all the
Constant.
time.
Yeah.
I love that you're highlighting the voice piece. I didn't really realize it was that parenting voice that sets the child off. Why is that?
Well, because it means um, what a parenting voice, by its very nature, is saying to the child, oh, right now, you don't get to be autonomous. Right now, I'm in charge of you, right? Put your shoes on. Put your shoes on.
Mm,
The child
okay.
is losing their autonomy in that moment.
Mm,
And
which
so,
is a threat.
and for some children, their autonomy is so important to them that
Yeah.
they are threatened. Yes. Now, not all children, but
Yeah.
the ones that
Strong-willed.
strong-willed ones, the ones with trauma, the
Yeah.
ones where the fit hasn't been real great, the ones who have autism with PDA, for example, which is pathological demand avoidance. I mean, those children are very, very difficult to parent because they cannot tolerate even the sound of a parental voice because
Hmm.
it's anxiety about losing their autonomy and their power. And so that's why children get like that, right? They're very sensitive to losing their autonomy. So how do you fix that, right? How do you stop having that parent voice? Well, it's not so much that you have to, yeah, it is. I was going to say, not that you really have to stop having that, but actually, it would be really great if we didn't speak to children that way anyway, because it has a disrespect component to it. It
Hmm.
does say to the child, I'm bigger, I'm more powerful, and I have better insurance than you, and you have to do what I tell you, right? And so
Yeah.
um,
And I'm in control and you're not in control.
instantly they lose their
Yeah.
power. And
Hmm.
so it would be nice if we actually thought of children as people and we didn't think of them as objects that we could push around or children that we own that we could push around. I mean, I'm as guilty as anyone else about this. So
Yeah.
I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. I'm just saying this is a normal way of thinking about children at
Yeah.
some level. Also, you're having to, project manage them all the time just to get out the door and get them to school and get to work and do all the things. So I totally, I totally relate to being a parent. So please don't hear this like criticism of any parent because I don't feel that way. However, I do think culturally we have a tendency to not respect children, just like elders. I don't think we're terribly respectful culturally in this particular
Hmm.
culture of respecting elders. And so we have a way of speaking that is negative or pejorative or authoritarian to a child and to an elder when we want them to do what we want them to do, when we want to take
Hmm.
autonomy from them. And so, if we could see children as whole people, just the same as us, not as equals, but as equal in deserving respect, then
Hmm.
we would use a different tone with them, right? We would be
Yeah.
more gentle and kind, like we are to our partner. I mean, like I hope we are to our partners and our friends, and like we don't like imagine having a friend that you only spoke to in that tone that we speak to children in when we're trying to get them out the door. I mean, I don't think we would have that friend very long.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think sort of really changing it's a paradigm shift, right? To see
Yeah.
um, for
Yeah.
as
I'd love for you to, yeah, as whole beings. And, the parenting educator, Chaim Ganat, who wrote the original kind of peaceful parenting book, um, he really was clear about distinguishing seeing children like a guest in your house related to their feelings and experiences and perspectives. But he also talked about setting limits on behavior that's not acceptable in the home. And so there's a distinguishing, because I think some parents listening might be like, so you tell me to let the kids just do whatever they want behaviorally. And we're talking about two different things. We're talking about feelings, experiences, perspectives, opinions. And then a different thing is like actions and behaviors that wouldn't be allowed, or something we don't want to condone. So I don't know if you can speak to that a little bit more. And then how do we actually execute that with a strong-willed child and that has challenging behavior?
yeah, so it's challenging to us behavior.
Yeah.
They are clinging to their autonomy. That's why it's challenging to us.
Hmm.
And so, what better way to respect them than to lean in and listen? What is it you want to do right now? How long do you think it takes you to do that? Oh, 2 minutes? 5 minutes? I have 5 minutes. Go ahead, do it. Go ahead and take 5 minutes, right? So just learning how to collaborate with a child in a not in a they don't have to go to school kind of way, but in a
Right. I was going to say the child that's like, well, I'm not going to school anymore. I'm
right.
9 years old. I'm
Yeah.
not going anymore. Right.
But I think that's a product somewhat of having done too much
Mm,
over parenting that child, right? And they're 9 years old and they're really done with it now. And so they do get to a place where they get done with us, and then they give us, I mean, we always say they're not giving us a hard time, they're having a hard time, but actually they're giving us a hard time sometimes too. Not
yeah.
not intentionally, but more like, I'm not doing this. You're not, don't get to push me around anymore.
Right.
Kids are very sensitive. Some kids, not all kids, are very, very sensitive to that. And so
Hmm.
yeah, I have a lot of empathy for you know, these lives we live, right, that are too fast, too full, too busy for our own goods, all of us. It would be
Yeah.
great if we could slow down to make room in our lives for our children who need autonomy and
Hmm.
um and to construct our lives better for ourselves and for them
Yeah.
when that's occurring. Um, that actually is a big part of paradigm shifting in a way, is to create the life that you can love, because you can't love your life when you're struggling with your child every single day to get them out
Right.
the door, to get out the door. But you need the time. I don't mean you wake up at 3 in the morning to have the time. I mean you create time in your life. Maybe you work with your job to let you have, flex hours in the morning, or, like just whatever it takes to be able to be the kind of parent you want to be for the child
Yeah.
you have rather than the one you
Hmm.
wish you had.
Yeah. Yeah. It's terribly hard. And I mean, in the United States for sure, but definitely also globally, more and more so because of just productivity and profits are more important than people. Just this whole idea of, you know, um, raising workers and just a whole other thing, right? Like we need to be part of the system and the engine. And if you're a step out of it to be slower, to live a slower, more mindful life, there's a lot of cultural pushback about that. So I hear what you're saying about if you're in that shoe closet and the kid's 9 and he's like, I'm not going to school ever again. There's obviously we have to again go back to self-regulation and helping them regulate their emotions so they can transition out of that. But you're kind of in the breakdown lane at this point because if it occurs so frequently, the child gets kind of gridlocked. And what I'm also hearing is that if we have a slower life and kind of think about how can we build more autonomy in our children's lives, maybe there's a point where we make kind of a mental like grid, like I'm going to give them as much autonomy as I can outside of these points in our day where I am making the decision. So the decision that you go to school is non-negotiable, but how do you want to go to school? Do you want to take the bus? Do you want me to drive you? Do you want to wear these shoes or these shoes? Do you want to and building that into your structure more regularly, more intentionally, especially for strong-willed children. And another example is like screens. Like let's say a 12-year-old begging for a phone. Everybody has a phone. I often tell parents, I think you should still say no to a smartphone that has internet and social media, even at age 12. But you have to give them some autonomy elsewhere because they're ready for more social engagement. They want to be connected with their peers. How can you find a win-win? Give them more autonomy in another part of their life while still holding that limit that's so important to your family values. So I'm not saying to be permissive and just let the kid run the show because they're strong-willed, particularly, like even in that case, but you have to find a way like to release some pressure. Because if you just keep adding more rules and rules and rules and they're getting older and older, they will rebel because it's going against their development to be so constrained and feel like they're stuck developmentally.
Right. I mean, absolutely. And so, that's sort of like money in the bank, right? If you give
Yeah.
a lot of autonomy in lots of places, then you're saving up for the day when you're like, yeah, you gotta go, buddy. And then
Yeah.
you just have more money in their bank, you have more savings there and they're willing to be all right with it because they know they feel more satiated basically by
Mm-hmm.
what they have. Also, collaboration is easier than it sounds because collaboration is just like, oh, how do you want to do it? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
what makes sense for you? Oh yeah, I have this checklist of all the things you have to get done in the morning. It's on the wall. You just go to look at it. You know what you have to do. But it's not, you don't have to do it in the order, or I might have said you have to do it in order, but maybe that's wasn't autonomous enough, right? Like do it in any order you want. That's fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Want to get it all done for yourself so you can go to school feeling ready.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that goes back to like respecting our children more as humans and holistic humans and listening to what they have to say, and we don't have to agree as adults, as parents, but let's at least hear them out, even if we end up saying, well, that's not going to work for me, maybe,
Yeah.
so it's fine to disagree, but it's more about how we do it and that we're still very respectful of, you have a different opinion about that. And then maybe brainstorming which really feeds into their autonomy. What ideas do you have? How can we solve this problem? This is tough. We don't really agree on this, but I still want to come to a conclusion here. So, how can we figure this out? What other ideas do you have?
Yeah, and I think sort of ferreting out what's a limit and what's a boundary, right? So a limit is this is my expectation basically, and this is what I'm going to do if that doesn't happen. So it's
Mm-hmm.
sort of finding a balance between those two things. And I'm going to give you an example that's not probably happy for people to hear, but I have a child that um, just smelled a lot, and took showers actually, but didn't wash well and couldn't smell their own body odors.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I understood that, I get that you can't smell this, but I can. And so this is what's true. I, I, I will not take you in my car to go to your friend's house or to go to school or anything, if you don't use soap when you take a shower and that you smell okay in the car. That's my boundary. I won't do that. I will take you
Mm-hmm.
if you in the shower use soap. And so it's not if you don't do this, I'm not going to take you. It's that I just can't be in the car with you when you smell like that, because I actually feel kind of nauseous. It doesn't
Hmm.
work for me.
Hmm.
And I know you can get to school, you can walk to school, ride your bike, you can go to your friend's house
Hmm.
in other ways, but I won't be the one to drive you because I can't.
Yeah.
So that's a balance between, this is my expectation, you do it or you don't do it, but this is what I won't do or what this is what I will do, either one of those, what I will or
Which is your boundary. The boundary is like what you will or will not do yourself. It doesn't have to do with the other person, right?
yeah,
But the limit has to do with what you're asking your child to yeah, to live up to, I guess. And then
expectation.
whatever support they need, you support them with that.
Yeah.
But it's
So
also their choice, right? Like to receive that support,
that's right.
especially
Receive
as
the
they get
support.
into the teen years.
Right. Or just say, no, I'm not. Yeah, then I'll never go in the car with you again. I'm like, okay, well,
You have a
there'll be a
choice
lot,
there.
there'll be a lot of things that you miss out on, honey. And that's fine with me. I mean, I'll feel sad that you don't come, but that's your choice.
Hmm.
And so, you may have some very strong-willed kids around certain things that are not that easy to talk about and that feel kind of
Yeah.
gross, like, oh, you have a gross kid that they never shower. It's like, well, he does shower. But he doesn't do it well. And he's a teenager. I'm not going to get in the shower and show him how to do it well anymore. Like I did that with
Hmm.
Phil.
Yeah. Right. 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 Yeah. 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 And so we're learning how to do this. And especially like speaking of teenagers, they're becoming adults and they're practicing. And we're learning to like give them that extra respect that adults have, but also setting our own boundaries as adults, as we do in adult relationships, so that we can have a good relationship. Without boundaries, when we're just like in their space and doing everything for them, or if we're letting them violate our boundaries, it's not good for either one of us. And it's not good modeling for a healthy relationship. So I think we begin definitely to do that with preteens and onward. I mean, even with younger children, it's just obviously younger children won't understand that concept intellectually. But as they get into more autonomy, boundaries come with that for us to role model as adults.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to use boundaries in a slightly different way when they're younger, but it's still going to sound the same, similar. Like, well, this is what I will do and this is what I won't do, honey. It's up to you. And I think it is a philosophy and not everybody is behind that philosophy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I get that. It's a choice too, how you parent.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not selling this parenting. I'm suggesting that this would be a more loving, more respectful, more peaceful way to parent.
Yeah. Yeah, because it also, I think, it nurtures the parent. The parent also has a desire for autonomy. Like, surprise, surprise, right? All humans do. And parents also don't want to feel controlled. And so, oftentimes, I think, especially conscious parents, they tend to prioritize the child's needs above everything else. And needs are so important. That is like the big shift, right? Culturally, that we need to make, but we don't want to get rid of ourselves like off the picture, right? We still need to be there as humans, because that's the only way we can sustain supporting our kids, is if we're there too, fully, and respect, self-respect, and boundaries to stay in it for the long game.
Yeah, for sure, because it's a marathon. This child rearing thing is a marathon.
Yeah.
I think so. I actually go against the grain a little bit with parents and tell them that they need to consider themselves first, which is not how
Yeah.
parents are taught, right? You're supposed to put the child ahead of everything. And I'm like, well, no, not really. It doesn't really work well to do that. You have to think about yourself and you have to include yourself in all the things that you're willing to do. Otherwise, you do end up being a doormat.
Mm-hmm.
You do end up feeling victimized by your children, or you feel
Yeah.
like they're tyrants and you are just their, minion. And that we have our own autonomy and our own power in that too. So that's why boundaries are super
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I love that you're highlighting that, and particularly coming from a background where you have that you've had children that are more challenging, maybe than an average child. You learn that pretty quickly, because the consequence of that is burnout, and now nobody's surviving, right? Like there is no adult in the room, and so taking care of ourselves almost becomes it's like the first step to surviving, really. A child that has big feelings, challenging behavior, because otherwise, you can't be there for them, which is, you care about them so much, you want to do everything for them, and you are the first piece to the puzzle. So,
Yeah, because you want to do more than survive too, right? You have to put yourself
right.
first in order to maintain your joy. Like if you lose joy in your life and your happiness in parenting and being part of this family because you're just so burnt out on feeling used, overused,
Yeah.
and abused, which a lot of parents do feel all these things. I certainly did, before I really understood it all. And
Yeah.
even then, I still had my moments. So it's not like anybody ever doesn't feel that 100%. But you do want to have some glimmers of joy in your life. And
For
if
sure.
you don't think about yourself, you tend to not have those.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love it. And you can't delight in your child if you don't find delight in your own self and your own life kind of first, right? It starts with your own mindset. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So many amazing ideas. Any other kind of final words as we wrap up? I know I could pick your brain for a lot longer than this, but we'll keep it to hopefully a little bit less than an hour. But yeah, any other final thoughts on our audience, for our audience listening?
No, I want to thank you for inviting me, and I love that delight in parenting is your thing, is your jam,
Yeah.
and and I just want to shout out to listeners, how important you are and how much you matter in a lot of times services are focused on the children, and that's fine, but frankly, it would be nice if there were a lot more services focused on you because
Hmm.
you do take it on the chin here quite a bit, and we give lip service to it takes a village, but it actually takes a real community of people who can be there for you in the dark of night, or those early
Hmm.
hours when you just wonder what the heck, you're doing, and what is this all for anyway? So take care of
Yeah.
yourselves. I want to just say to your listeners, take care of yourselves. You matter so much and you're important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think community plays a huge role in that and supporting ourselves. Yeah. Would you share a little bit about where parents can find out more about you for those listening? And if you want to mention any freebies or whatever's on the website, and we'll also have the links below the podcast as well.
Yeah, so you can go to lovemattersparenting.com and you'll find a whole page of free resources there. And you will also find access to my online therapeutic parenting program and a reset program that I just put up there. So it's a shorter version of the long version of getting your feet wet in therapeutic parenting. So yeah, I welcome you to come and join the community. You can sign up for the blog and then you're just automatically in the community. So you'll at least get all of that
Mhm.
on a regular basis. So
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your wisdom and your time. I look forward to catching up again sometime in the future.
this was very lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.